Hey everyone! Before we begin today, we want to thank our newest patron, Ileana. Welcome to the team. If you want to be like Ileana and get access to our Discord community, our notes, and a chance to submit your very own study questions for our next book, head on over to patreon.com/pod and prejudice. And now, we hope you enjoy this week's episode covering Eligible by Curtis Sittenfeld.
For our listeners, it is so hot in this room. So we have tahini and mango popsicles to keep us cool while we record this for you. We make our way through the elements to record you content in the heat, in the cold, in the thunderstorms,
We must talk about Jane Austen.
or Jane Austen adjacent content, of course.
Speaking of which,
This is Becca.
this is Molly.
We are here to talk about Jane Austen adaptations.
We are here specifically to talk about Eligible by Curtis Sittenfeld.
Listeners, if you're new here, I, Becca, have read many of Jane Austen's novels and read also some adaptations of her work that are more modernized.
And I, Molly, am doing all of that for the first time through this podcast.
If you want to hear Molly read through Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Emma, or Persuasion for the first time, you can listen to seasons 1, 2, 3, and 4 of this podcast, respectively. But that is not what we're doing here today.
No, today we are talking about Eligible by Curtis Sittenfeld, and this is the first time we've done something like this.
Yeah, we're doing like a little book club for you guys. There are so many written adaptations of Jane Austen's work, and we have been so lucky to have some of the like premier authors writing Jane Austen content on the podcast to date. But as we wrap up Persuasion, we thought it would be good to take a little step back and sort of visit some of the more iconic modern adaptations of Jane Austen's work that have been written on the page rather than just put on screen.
And this one in particular was written in 2016, so it's a long way off. It takes place in 2013. And we figured a lot of the newer adaptations we've done have been brand new, and we've gotten to talk to the authors as they're being released. And for this one, we were like, let's do a book review of something that came out almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, and this one is a New York Times bestseller. So it's one of the more popular modern adaptations of Jane Austen's work. For those who may not know, this is obviously an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, written in modern day America, 10 years ago ish,
Mhm.
to be exact. And it was a hit when it first came out. It is part of, I think, like some canon of modern adaptations of Jane Austen's work. This one is the only one of those I had heard of before, but I'd never read it until we read it for this podcast.
I don't know if she has other ones.
She didn't write them. They're like
Oh, I see.
they're like a commissioned group of adaptations of Jane Austen's work. I had not heard of the other ones,
Oh, I
nor have
see.
I heard anything about them. I know they exist, and I think there's 4 or 5 of them. But this is the one that like clearly broke through. It is very popular, and almost everyone who reads Jane Austen adaptations, uh, sort of religiously, would know "Eligible" by Curtis Sittenfeld.
And Curtis Sittenfeld is recently more of a household name because of romantic comedy, which I feel like is on all of the bookshelves these days.
Yeah, she's gotten quite popular.
Yeah, so she's got a lot of hits, which I actually haven't read. This is my first experience reading a book by her, but I really enjoyed her writing style, so I'm excited to read more books by her.
Oh, she is very funny.
She is very funny. So we should start talking about it, but before we do, we should say that we are not going to be spoiler free on this. We're going to talk about the plot, we're going to talk about the ending. So if you haven't read it yet and you don't want to be spoiled, I recommend going and reading it first. I read it in like 3 days. So
I mean, I read it on my honeymoon, so
yeah.
now that everyone has read "Eligible" by Curtis Sittenfeld or is ready to sit here and get completely spoiled on the book, Molly, would you like to take our listeners through a brief synopsis of this adaptation of Jane Austen's work?
Yes, and I will say I sat down to write the synopsis today, and I had, like, a very long paragraph trying to talk about all the plot points that were going on in this book, and then I was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna give the premise,
Yes.
because when we get into our discussion of the adaptation, we'll talk about all of the different plot points."
Yes.
So the premise is it's Pride and Prejudice set in 2013 Cincinnati, in which the eldest Bennet sisters are approaching 40, and Mr. and Mrs. Bennet are country club parents who don't care that they are deep in debt. Jane and Liz have recently ended up back in Cincinnati from New York because Mr. Bennet has had a heart attack. And that is where our story takes place.
It is indeed. So before we go beat by beat through sort of the adaptation choices made by Curtis Sittenfeld in the book, we thought we would take a moment to discuss our opinions of the book. So, really, in brief words, let's discuss what we thought.
Yeah, so I thought we could talk about our well, first of all, our overall impression and then our favorite and least favorite elements of the book. Like I said, I read it in 3 days, or in, like, 3 sittings rather, over the course of a longer period of time, and it took me a minute to get on board. I will say at first, I was like, "This is pretty dated," because obviously it was written almost 10 years ago, and it takes place even before that. So I was like, "Okay, this is very" like, a lot of the references, I'm like, "Okay, I know I've been there, done that." And then I was also worried because the Bennetts are, like, very clearly Republicans and, like, behind the times even for 2013. And I had a hard time at first discerning whether some of their opinions were the opinions of the author or, like, the opinions the book was taking, like the message the book was trying to send. And it was soon revealed to me that that's not the case and that the book was actually, like, pretty progressive for its time. And so the second, like, half, I would say, from part 2 onward, I was very on board.
I think that's pretty similar to my experience. I really enjoyed myself reading this. I did not think it was a perfect book or a perfect adaptation, but overall, I thought it was a lot of fun, and I thought it was done with a lot of care towards the original story and what it was Jane Austen was trying to do. I agree with you that I found it to be dated, not just in terms of references, but in terms of vibes. There's something that happened in like the 2010s where at the time I thought, oh, this is going to be timeless. Um, and this will translate well in the future for a lot of content. And I've been surprised by how many things I thought would be timeless ended up kind of feeling dated by the 2020s. That being said, I still enjoy the content that is a little dated. Just I have to take it with the like 2010s grain of salt. And we'll get into it. I would characterize this as potentially my least favorite large thing about the book,
Mhm.
but there is an element of like 2010s identitarian feminism to this. And this is not a criticism that I think tanks the book for me.
Mhm.
It is just something I'm going to acknowledge. There is a way in which the author uses identity as plot,
Mhm.
which has its moments where it works and has its moments where it doesn't. The 2 that were really jarring for me was, Kitty's boyfriend, who did not get a lot of screen time in terms of the book, other than to find out he was a black character who was buddies with Lizzie and her Mrs. Bennet was slightly racist.
Mhm.
I felt like the black characters are treated a little bit with, like, idea gloves, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Um
Very much
and,
so.
to prove, like, that Mrs. Bennet is kind of a racist in a way that, like, sucks.
Well, not even just that, because the entirety of Jasper's, like, scandal
Mhm.
is that he committed a hate crime, and we don't get to learn anything about the teacher against whom he committed the hate crime except that she's a black woman.
Exactly, and a poet, and the story is about the fact that Lizzie has to deal with the fact that her boyfriend's racist
Mhm.
in the context of a story where there are not black characters given a lot of agency and a lot of
Mhm.
inner life.
Yeah.
Like, I would compare it to Ham, Lydia's husband at the end of the
The
book,
husband, yeah.
who's a trans character who I think has a little bit more meat on the bones as a character, so
Totally.
I think that story, even though it is identitarian and that it uses Ham's trans identity to give us the Lydia rebellion, I do think that he is given enough inner life that it is more holistically and more humanely like rendered portrayal. But I think that I found the treatment of race in the book to be a little lacking on that front. And the one where it bothered me as well that had little to do with that was Georgiana's anorexia,
Mhm.
because I thought that seemed to me like there was no Wickham Georgiana matchup here, and I thought that Curtis Sittenfeld was using the anorexia to shorthand vulnerability for Georgie.
Yeah.
And as someone who, was a girl in the early 2000s, I'm very close to ED for a lot of reasons in my
Mhm.
life. I don't love that as a just general plot device. Like there wasn't a lot going on with Georgie other than being really skinny in a way that Lizzie noticed.
Right, I mean, it was almost the only thing that Georgie had to do was text Lizzie a misleading text, and everything
Mhm.
else about her was just anorexic, and it was the first thing that Lizzie noticed about her, and they talked about it for an entire page, and I was just like, "This feels like there's no point."
The point for me was that, like, you get Georgiana as this vulnerable creature that Darcy's protecting in Pride and Prejudice because she fell for Wickham,
Right.
and they didn't have her fall for Wickham here, which I think is great. You don't need
Yeah,
Georgiana to fall for
but
Wickham.
then give her a personality.
Yeah, and but if you want a shorthand vulnerability, there's a lot of ways to do that that isn't just anorexia, and it was jarring and didn't work for me.
I fully agree, and I also think that, like, there was no reason to even make her vulnerable since her storyline didn't involve Darcy having to swoop in and protect her from Wickham.
Yeah, I also think you can shorthand like a woman in her 20s, like kind of trying to find her way as vulnerable
Yeah.
and in need of her older brother without it being like a medical condition. But that being said, that's the strongest and harshest criticism I have for this book. So I think we can like acknowledge that there are those flaws in the book. And that's what I mean when I say it's dated.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think a lot of that energy is energy that was in a lot of content
Mhm.
in the 2010s.
Yes.
But that being said, I have a lot of nice things to say about this book, mostly that I think it's really funny.
Yes. Before we get into the nice things, I'll just add because you've put words to a lot of my least favorite things
Mhm.
about the book. The last least favorite thing about the book that I'll say is again, as a device to make Lizzie's mom seem worse, she's very fat phobic the whole time, especially like towards Charlotte.
Yeah.
Um, it's thrown around very flippantly throughout the book. So I didn't like the casual fat phobia.
I think that's fair. I found it a little bit more successful in terms of its rendering of the humanity of Charlotte
Mhm.
than like I would put that more in the category of the treatment of the trans characters in the book rather than
Yeah.
the treatment of the black characters or Georgie's anorexia. Personally, I thought that there was a weird energy where Lizzie and Jane were always eating salads, which was bizarre.
And going for runs.
Yeah. Well, the running I didn't mind because like
I
that
minded the
was
running because they went running every single day,
yeah, well, Lizzie that was a plot device to keep Lizzie and Darcy near each other, and
and
I
it
actually
felt like that.
I yeah, but I didn't mind it so much, but I found Charlotte's the rendering of Charlotte I thought was, I guess I agree with you that some of there was some, like, shortcutting to Charlotte being, like, a more of a spinster than Lizzie or, Jane because she was larger, but I thought that, like, Curtis Sittenfeld was in on the joke with us about Mrs. Bennet being a piece of shit,
Yeah.
and that like, the way that she talked about Charlotte being large and, like, "My girls might be on there married, but at least they're not large like Charlotte." Like, that felt to me organic and, like, cruel in the way that a lot of middle-aged mothers are,
Yes.
and also it felt like Charlotte was a wholly formed character who was really cool outside of that,
Mhm.
and you could understand why Collins, or in this case, Willie, would wanna be with her
Mhm.
because she's smart and she's sharp and she was a lot of fun. And
Yes.
she clearly was like a hot commodity in her own right.
Yes, I guess what bothered me about it wasn't necessarily the way Mrs. Bennet talked about her. I think it was that she was I mean, it's the plot of the story, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I love having a plus size character in the story.
Oh yeah.
I wish that it was a main character, but again, this is 2013, but, like, Kitty and Lydia are in CrossFit, and Jane and Lizzie are always going for runs, and Mary
Is bowling
is
and
bowling, but, like, that whole family is, like, fit and
mhm.
skinny and, like, the ideal 2013 body,
Yep.
and then the frumpy best friend is the plus size one. So it's just a product of the time, and for me, that's what's dated, but I do agree that Charlotte was an awesome character in this, and, like, they gave her a
Yeah.
lot more agency than she I think actually they maintained the heart of what Jane Austen was doing, which is, like, Charlotte's taking her life under her
Yeah.
own control and
And like I said, like again, the identitarian politics used as a shorthand to get us to a certain plot point.
Mhm.
But I found Charlotte's rendering I agree with you that it wasn't as successful as, like, Ham's rendering in my mind, but I also thought that it was done with a lot more, grace and intention than some of the like the Georgie plot line
Mhm.
or
Shane.
Shane. I even forgot his name, and that should tell you
Yeah, they
something.
didn't give him anything.
And the racism like surrounding like what Jasper did.
Yes.
So like I think we can agree that like that is sort of the weak spot of this book and where it leans dated.
Mhm.
It's not fatal to enjoyment
No,
of the book at all.
and let's talk about
Um,
the good
yeah,
parts.
we've gotten our criticisms out of the way, and like we think those are real and serious, but at the same time, we're reading a book that's an adaptation of Jane Austen's work, and we also had a fun time reading it. So as I said, this book is really funny.
So funny, and what I loved about her style of writing
Mhm.
is that, like, she got the biting wit that Jane Austen does in, like, Regency era English in modern day American English. Like, the way that like, some of it feels almost Victorian, but she's just using words that we would use today. I don't know how to describe what I don't know how
Yeah.
to say what I'm trying to say, but do you know what I mean?
Well, the reason it translated as odd for you and off-putting, I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, for the first few chapters, is because at first you don't know how serious she is.
Mhm.
And as you get further into the book, it becomes clear that she's really just unserious. She's like absolutely fucking unserious in the
Yeah.
best way.
Yeah.
So, like, nothing is taken super earnestly in the book. And that's kind of how Jane Austen writes as well. Like, when Jane Austen turns out to the audience to explain things, she's being unserious herself.
Absolutely. I'm looking for, like, an example of the way that this language is, and I feel like Darcy's Proposal is a good place to put
Oh,
it.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Um It's probably an illusion caused by the release of oxytocin during sex, Darcy continued, but I feel as if I'm in love with you. You're not beautiful, and you aren't nearly as funny as you think you are. You're a gossip fiend who tries to pass off your nosiness as anthropological interest in the human condition. And your family, obviously, is a disgrace. Yet, in spite of all common sense, I can't stop thinking about you. The time has come for us to abandon this ridiculous pretense of hate sex and admit that we're a couple. It's just so funny.
It's, like, really quite funny. "You're not as funny as you think you are" is insane to say during a love proposal, and that is exactly what he says to her in the original Pride and Prejudice.
It's exactly, but like it's in
Yeah,
language that they would use in Cincinnati in 2013.
absolutely.
Yeah, it is really funny, and I thought that in a lot of ways it was ahead of its time.
And we'll get into this a little bit, but another thing that I thought was really absolutely fucking brilliant about this is we talk a lot about the difficulty of translating class, the
Mhm.
like and we'll talk about this in more detail when we get to, like, the adaptation elements of the book, but it is really hard to capture Jane Austen's biting class commentary. I actually thought you translated it quite well to 2010's America
Mhm.
because, like, basically the conceit is that Darcy and Bingley are West Coast rich and the Bennets are Cincinnati rich. And there is a Midwest, mid-sized city, like, we're top of society element to Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Bennet in this that feels deeply cringe when you're
Mhm.
reading it
Yes.
in a way that it's supposed to because, like, there's nothing wrong with the fact that they're, like, at the top of Cincinnati society, but the way they feel like the need to tout that in front of Darcy, who's, like, a gazillionaire, and Bingley, who's a reality TV star,
Mhm.
is so exactly what it's like when Mrs. Bennet is bragging about dining with the best families in the neighborhood when she's visiting Netherfield and she's trying to like impress Darcy and like let him know that she's actually a woman about town.
Yeah.
It's like your version of high society is different than our version of high society. That is a real class conflict that exists in the United States today and I think is captured quite well in the way the book is written.
Yeah. I'm looking for the confrontation between Liz and Caroline. I feel like she says something,
Your sister is lucky to be marrying Chip, Caroline said. Very lucky. Don't let it give you any ideas. I know your family thinks of itself as like, Caroline made air quotes, Cincinnati high society. But that's an oxymoron. And Darcy and I go way back. There's always been an understanding that we'd end up together. We have this intense chemistry, and the moment is finally right for us to be serious.
yeah, exactly. So she puts it very plainly there, but it's definitely implied throughout the whole book. And I think that you're right that she does a really good job of translating that in a way that
Yep.
we would understand as Americans.
Absolutely, and, like, when, like, Jane and Bingley are getting married and they're talking about doing, like, this ultra luxe LA wedding that gets filmed, because that's another element of the book we haven't talked about much, is that, like, Charles Bingley in this is a reality TV star for
Mhm.
essentially The Bachelor,
Yeah.
and they filmed Jane and Bingley's wedding, and when Mrs. Bennet says, "Couldn't they film it at our local Cincinnati church?" It's so nice there.
Yes.
It's, like, just one of those moments where
I felt so deeply in my soul when Jane was like, I think it's easier for them to do it in LA."
yes. So, yeah, that's another element I thought it worked really well for me in this book.
Yes. So we'll get into the different elements that they adapted and how things were changed next, but I wanted us to, like, rate the book both as a book and then as an adaptation of Jane Austen.
Are we grading? Are we rating out of 1 to 10?
Let's do 1 to 5 stars.
Okay,
So, as a book, I will give it a 4.
I agree. It's a
Yeah.
4. I would give it a 4.3
Mhm.
as an Austen adaptation because I think specifically there's some really, like, dedicated work in making Pride and Prejudice work
Yeah.
in, the modern era.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's only a 4, which is still a great score
Yeah.
for, book itself.
Yeah, I think there were some elements that I didn't love as a book, just plot-wise,
Mhm.
like Liz trying to sell her family's home in a week when she literally just got there and they
Calm down, Jesus.
literally didn't tell them anything. Anyway, so that, like, that all bothered me. I thought that the wedding at the end I was a little bit iffy on. As an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, I'm actually gonna go ahead and give it, like, I don't know, 4.7. Even a 5, just because I thought that the changes that they made were really effective, and I thought that they translated the characters really well
Mhm,
onto modern day people, and then in the moments where they changed the story, like with Catherine de Bourgh and Caroline being the person to come up to Lizzie at the end, like, I thought that those all worked really well,
mhm.
so none of the adaptation points were points of contention for me.
We've read a lot of Jane Austen adaptations, we've watched a lot of Jane Austen adaptations. You can tell when someone's kind of, like, grabbing the beats of the story and when someone's a true fan.
Mhm, and I mean, she writes in the style of Jane Austen, but in the modern English language, and even her chapters are, like, Jane Austen length chapters, like, some of them are really brief.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the characters are, like, just direct, like, 2 centuries later, like,
Mhm.
translations, like, Mr. Bennet is the same.
In fact, this made me understand why people hate Mr. Bennet.
Oh my god, yeah, and we'll get into it.
Yes.
And I thought, like, other things, like making Lizzie and Jane older ramps up the pressure that wouldn't be on a 20-year-old girl to get married
Mhm.
in 2013, but
Similar to our discussion of why a Sarah Snook persuasion would be so good.
oh my god, yeah, no, because
Give me
because
a 37-year-old heroine.
here's the thing, like, 20-year-old girls are not pressured to get married, mostly. They are in some corners of this country, but for the most part, we're in New York, and in New York, a 20-year-old is definitely not pressured to get married, but a 31-year-old sure as hell is, and that gets more intense as you go up in age, so, like, we're not better than the Austen era about not pressuring women to get married, we just do it later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And with the pressure also of having a baby, which we'll talk about, that everyone's like, "Oh, my clock is ticking."
Oh, yeah, and that's, like, that plays a huge role in the story as well,
Yeah.
and it leads to some of the most cruel comments from Mrs. Bennet
Mhm.
about her daughters.
Yes. So, should we dive into the various elements of this book and how they were adapted?
Yes, so you wanted to start with Jasper Wick and Tam Ryan?
Yeah, I thought, well, okay, just to give an overarching,
Mhm.
description of the way that they changed Wickham from the original story to now.
Yeah.
There was Jasper Wick, who was the man that Liz has been in love with for over a decade, like 16 years or
Mhm.
something, but who's always been with other women and they've just been friends. And finally, after he's married with a kid, he's like, actually, you're the one I want. And me and my wife are going to get a divorce, but we have to wait for her grandmother to die so that our child can get his inheritance.
So Liz essentially is 38, journalist, single, living in New York, And the reason that she is still single, according to this book, for the most part, is not actually out of choice,
Mhm.
but because she spent her formative years hung up on this man who is she's essentially in a situationship with when this book opens.
Yes.
He is our Wickham equivalent. And do you want to start with just talking about
Yeah,
him?
let's
Or
just
yeah,
talk about him to start.
yeah. I thought, I mean, I despised this man.
Yeah, he
Like,
was terrible.
oh my god, and, like, in a way that was, like, grating to read almost, but only because we've all been Lizzie.
Right, I was like, "Wait, I would also be in love with him as
Yeah.
much as I hate reading about him."
Personally, I'll say this, we've all been Lizzie in this situation. We've all been strung along by an ain't shit man who makes you feel like you're the best, even though you're truly his safety net.
Mhm.
That being said, 12 years is an unhinged amount of time to be
Sure.
hung up on this man, and I get it. I really do. I've been hung up on men like this for years at a time,
Yeah.
and it can really wreck your life. But, like, I wasn't mad at Lizzie for being in this situation, I felt for her.
Yeah.
Like, that is an insane situation to put yourself in with a man, and he also sounded like the fucking worst.
Mhm.
She talks about how the sex is, like, kinda adequate,
Yeah.
and he also is, like, this super self-centered journalist. He only wants to be with her after he's already, like, had a kid with somebody else, and one of the best written moments of the book, I think, is actually when he comes to visit her in Cincinnati
Mhm.
to write a story. And there's a dinner that she has with Jane and Jasper, and Jane is just excruciatingly, like, seething through the entire dinner and clearly hates this man.
Mhm.
And Jane is, classic Jane Bennett in every adaptation, sweet little angel Jane.
Yeah.
And you just feel the reflection of the man. Like, you can see Lizzie, like, having Jane be a mirror to her life choices
Yeah.
in that moment because she's so embarrassed
Yeah.
by Jasper's behavior.
And she thinks like, "Oh, when we get back to his place," she's like, "Okay, this is better, like, now I don't have to think about how Jane's seeing him, I can just, like, be with
Yep,
him, and he's already asleep on the bed."
yep,
And then when she talks to Jane about it later, she's like, "I'm sorry he was such a douchebag at dinner." Jane goes, "He was just being himself."
which is fucking brutal.
Yes.
Also, we should talk about this because the way that Darcy is rendered with respect to Wickham here is interesting. It's way less personal.
Yes.
I did like some of this change though, because essentially in this book, Darcy and Wickham went to college together, or Jasper.
Mhm.
And Darcy's basically like sorry he got kicked out of Stanford. And Lizzie is hearing for the first time in over a decade that her best friend was kicked out of Stanford.
Mhm.
And she hears the story from Wickham and he's like, oh my God, Darcy's the reason I got kicked out. He was so sanctimonious about a shitty story I wrote, which like was clearly meant to be satire.
Yeah, which, like, already reflects bad on him because he's like, "I wrote this gross story about these gross dudes and everyone was offended, but they didn't get it." Like, that was already bad, but, like, Darcy got him kicked out
Yeah.
because he was on the panel that reviewed his case.
And I thought that was fascinating because he was not able to convince Lizzie
Mhm.
in this moment that he was fully the victim.
Yeah.
And also, it was a more interesting dynamic because he was a pre-existing, like, force in Lizzie's
Yeah.
life, as opposed to somebody that meets her, says he also hates Darcy, and moves on with his life. He's instead like, "Oh, you're getting to know Darcy now," and it's her best friend being like, "This guy ain't shit."
Right.
But the behavior already sets off like 1,000 red flags for Liz, and when she finally finds out from Darcy what actually happened, because basically the line she takes before that is, "Yeah, it sounds like he was being stupid, but, like, you would get him kicked out of school for that."
Mhm.
And Darcy's like, "If it were just that, then sure." But what actually ends up happening is that, like, there is a black professor that, Wickham is working with, and she wants to get this story banned in part because the advocate groups on campus want it banned, and he gets drunk and goes into her office and pees on all of her shit, and it becomes very clear that there's, like, a racial element to this, uh, we could call it a bias incident, we could call it a hate crime,
Mhm.
and that's when Lizzie, like, kinda has to leave Jasper behind in her life, and, like, we discussed this, this works on its in isolation
Mhm.
as, a plot point for me. It does make him look stupid, and it makes him look small,
Mhm.
and it makes him look insidious.
Mhm.
Again, I think, like, if the story generally had a better relationship with its black characters,
Yeah.
I would be happier with it.
Yeah.
But because it's in isolation, it's a little like, oh, the white girl grappling with the fact that her boyfriend might be racist. I would have wanted there to be more humanity given to the characters of color outside of the like plot device of having Wickham be just a piece of shit because he's a racist.
Mhm.
But that being said, Wickham does come off as a piece of shit because he's racist. And the way in which Lizzie falls out of love with him
Mhm.
is quite well written because you just see her learn like that maybe they're not as compatible as she thought. Maybe she's not as happy as she thought. And then when she finds this out, it's like a final straw where she finally understands how pathetic he
Yeah.
is. And I like that.
I like that too. On the other side of things, we have so that was Wick. Now we have Ham. Ham Ryan, short for Hamilton Ryan, who from the beginning is Lydia's boyfriend. Her new boyfriend, so, like, we don't know a ton about
Mhm.
him. We just, like, meet him, and he seems really nice, and it took me an embarrassingly long time to put together Wick and Ham, and that Ham I was
Mhm.
like, "Ham, what an interesting name," and then I realized halfway through the book, I was like, "Oh my god, is that
Wickham. Yep.
Wickham?" I didn't think that about the possibility that they could split the storyline in 2 into
Mhm.
the Wickham that wrongs Lizzie and the Wickham that has to do with Lydia, who does not wrong Lydia in this because Ham is actually an icon in this. Um,
Ham is quietly the best character in this entire
yeah,
book. Yeah.
the only person who doesn't say anything unproblematic at any point, but his storyline with Lydia, who sucks in this.
I kind of love her, but I kind of hate her. It's kind of amazing. So Lydia in this is a selfish, spoiled 23-year-old who is the type of pretty blonde girl who won't stop talking about her own poop.
Mhm. Yes,
And
she's so dumb.
yeah, and clearly is super lazy and kind of a nightmare for her sisters to deal with.
Mhm.
I loved the way they did the Lydia plotline in this because
Yes.
as we've talked about in the original Pride and Prejudice, Lydia is quite the victim.
Mhm. She's not a victim at all here.
I did not find her to be a victim whatsoever here, and she never feels like a victim. She never acts like a victim. And instead, I liked that she kind of got this beautiful love story.
Yeah.
Um, and Ham, the character, so you meet Ham, and Ham runs the CrossFit gym where
Yes.
Lydia works out. And you are led to, early in the story to believe that Ham is hiding something.
Mhm.
And in the context of the story, it's very obvious early on that Jasper Wick is like Lizzie's Wickham.
Mhm.
So you know that whatever's going on with Lydia is going to be kind of separate there. So you kind of like, okay, I guess we're splitting the plot line into the Lydia plot line and the Lizzie plot line with Wickham. And I had this moment when Ham was evading questions about his upbringing
Mhm.
where I was like, is Curtis Sittenfeld giving us a trans character? Because this is translating as a trans character for me. And then lo and behold, like the big shock that comes down is that Lydia tells her parents that her boyfriend is trans. They have a freak out because they're, Republicans. And Ham and Lydia run off to Chicago to get married.
Mhm. Which Ham later explains to Lizzie. He was like, "That isn't how I would have chosen to
Yeah.
marry your sister, but I was afraid that if we gave her time to try to, like, explain to her parents and
Mhm.
reconcile, they were gonna convince her, and I didn't wanna lose the
Yeah.
love of my life."
Yeah, and the only thing that doesn't quite make sense in the story here for me is that Ham is a fucking rock star, and Lydia, as you have mentioned, is kind of a selfish pain in the butt.
Yeah, and
Um,
that Lizzie calls that out at one point too. She's like, "I just greatest mystery about Ham is what is he doing with my sister?"
and that happens like multiple times in the story. So like there's a really quite bitingly done bit where it's Lizzie is your classic like New York liberal trying to like figure out how to say and do the right things, but like
Mhm.
fumbling at first and then doing a bunch of research and being like, actually, now I'm hashtag enlightened. Um,
She tries so hard.
yeah, and it is so accurate to how any like person would have reacted in 2013 because she like first she doesn't know what's going on, she says a bunch of politically incorrect shit, and then she's like, I'm really embarrassed that I did that.
Yep.
And instead, actually, I've learned all about the trans experience and now I'm an hashtag expert.
She
And
buys her parents a book and she
she
leaves it for
buys
them.
them a book on gender ideology. And poor Ham is just like honestly like shown throughout the book to be like deeply caring and engaged with Lydia's sisters and clearly like making an effort to try to be a part of this family and like cleaning out the fucking basement with Lizzie when no one else will do it with her. And you get this portrait of a person who's just like really trying to give this girl you're with, like he's with, like the princess ass treatment. And I don't know. I found myself deeply rooting for him and Lydia through the story.
Same. But it
Yeah.
was interesting the fact that at one point, I don't remember which sister it was, maybe it was Mary or Mr. Bennet or something. It was like, I wonder if she's gonna be like a big LGBT activist now. And Kitty was like, "No, Lydia's never thought of herself that way." Like she like it just like it seems like even though she's in a relationship with a trans
Mhm.
person, she's still a product of her parents and like is still kind of
Mhm.
not a big like
Yeah.
queer activist. She's not gonna like change in 1 minute. Like she fell in love with a trans person.
I kinda liked that,
No, it was interesting.
because, I mean, listen, she's a straight girl, and she
Yeah.
says, "I'm a straight girl. I'm in a relationship with a man. I'm in love with a man."
Yeah.
This man happens to be trans,
Yeah.
but that's kind of, like, the least interesting, like, part of our lives
Yeah.
together, which we're living a fucking rocker CrossFit life.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it was I loved it. I
yeah.
did. I loved their relationship and I loved their ending, and I think that we should also draw attention to the way that Darcy ended up helping their family in his big sweeping gesture was not like going and paying for their wedding,
Yeah.
but rather trying to explain to the Bennets in,
Medical
doctor language.
terms.
Yeah, he was like, "I'm a doctor." And he was like, "I know this isn't the best way to put it, but I'm gonna try to get them to come to terms with Ham being trans by telling them that it's a birth defect."
Mhm.
And he admits to Liz that he's like, "Ah, I know that's not the best way to say it."
Yeah, and that's, like, what Lydia, kinda says.
Yeah, which
She's like,
she has an iconic speech about it where she's like, "Uh, they don't need to understand. He's not asking them for permission to exist."
yeah, exactly. Because she's like, "Oh, fuck Darcy. He's the one who fed mom and dad that shit about Ham having a birth defect," which, like, fair.
Absolutely.
And, like, Darcy himself is kind of like, "Yeah, nope, I know it's not right, but I also know that your mother was not going to accept it on any other terms."
Yeah.
And it meant something to Lizzie to have her family not fighting. Because for context, when Ham comes out to the family, it goes poorly. Lydia and, Ham elope. Liz and Jane are happy for them, if a little worried. Kitty's kind of, like, neutral on the subject, and Mary and the parents are kind of, like, cutting them out.
Yeah. It's kind of shitty though. Like I'm very much on Lydia's side.
Oh, 100%.
I think Darcy overstepped.
I mean, yeah, I this is another piece, like, I generally did really enjoy the Lydia Ham plotline. I thought, like, Ham was, like, one of the better characters in the book, and one where, like, it was refreshing to, have Lydia be just in a healthy and happy relationship.
Yeah.
It was just nice to see.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think, like, it was a little clumsy. This again goes to the identitarian use of plot devices, where Darcy explaining, like, trans identity to the Bennets. Like, the idea of Darcy trying to reconcile Lizzie's family is very sweet. The manner in which it was done could have been done better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of Darcy, should we talk about Lizzie and Darcy's relationship and how that's adapted?
Yes, we should. And for our listeners, Lizzie is a journalist from New York City. She comes back to Cincinnati to essentially, like, take care of her family after her dad has a massive heart attack. And Darcy is a neurosurgeon who's at a hospital in Cincinnati doing, like, research, and he's from a super wealthy West Coast family, and is kind of a snot about everything in Cincinnati except the chili at the
Mhm.
Skylight.
Yeah, he loves Skyline chili, which like didn't sound appealing to me.
You have to be very careful here because 'cause we're treading on a lot of, like,
Is
topics.
it a real place?
I don't know if Skyline's a real place. I would assume there was an air in which Curtis Sittenfeld's rendition of Cincinnati felt organic to me.
She is from there.
Yeah, so she's clearly naming off
It's a real
places.
place.
Yeah. So Cincinnati chili is, like, a staple of the region. Like, it's something that, like, people in Cincinnati take very seriously. It is chili on top of spaghetti. Molly looks like she wants to throw up, I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, listen, it doesn't look bad. And also, basically isn't chili just tomato sauce with lots of good flavors in it, so I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially like a bolognese with beans, but it's like something that, like, Cincinnati takes very seriously, like Cincinnati chili.
Alright, I'll take it back. Skyline chili sounds great.
But it is a funny quirk of Darcy as a character because it is, like, such a Cincinnati dish, and I think that's kind of the point,
Yes,
to have him, like, really into this organic and authentic Cincinnati
but
thing.
he hates Cincinnati?
Exactly. I liked Darcy and Lizzie having a fuck buddy relationship.
Yeah, it was random, but I didn't hate it. I just thought that leading up to that point, I felt like they didn't hate each other enough to be having hate sex. Like, he was already in love with her, obviously, or at least
Yeah,
he liked her.
yeah, I mean, listen, when they first meet, his initial speech about Lizzie is actually really fucking brutal.
Brutal.
And, his proposal to her also
So
super
mean.
brutal.
And then when she calls him out on it, or when he apologizes to her for it, he's like, "I thought I was being funny. I thought I had to overcompensate for how much I was in love with you by being mean," which isn't really the heart of the proposal. Like, he does really believe those things in Pride and Prejudice, and in this, he was like, "Those things are all true, but they're what I love about you." So it felt a little bit different.
I mean, it was certainly a little different. I found it a little jarring only because, and I did generally quite like this Darcy. I thought he was
Yes.
a pretty good rendition of, like, of Mr. Darcy being kind of like it made sense to me why he was in Cincinnati because doctors end up at hospitals in the middle of the country that are not their preferred place to be,
Mhm.
all the time. And his, level of wealth being kind of understated, but, like, shocking,
Mhm.
also felt very Mr. Darcy. What didn't really translate to me is, like, what he says is so fucking rude, and he's so polite in all the other scenes.
Yeah.
This is what he says that first gets Lizzie to hate him. Here's what I've learned about the people in the city, Darcy was saying. They grade their women on a curve. If someone is described as sophisticated, it means once during college she visited Paris. And if someone is described as beautiful, it means she's 15 pounds overweight instead of 40. And they're obsessed with matchmaking. They act like they're doing you a favor by conscripting you to have coffee with the elementary school teacher from their church during the 2 free hours you might have in an entire week. I've lost count of how many of my colleagues' wives have tried to set me up. With your having been on TV, they must be licking their chops. And before he says that, Chip mentions that Lizzie's single, and he says, "I suppose it would be unchivalrous to say I'm not surprised." It just feels, like, really rude.
Especially
Like,
because they haven't actually talked yet.
yeah, like, that just feels, like, insanely kinda misogynist, rude, grumpy, crazy to me.
Yeah. Though, let's give it to Liz, who is way, she's a little bit more out there than any Lizzie Bennet that we've seen before.
I think this translates correctly because I think
Yes.
she's the same amount of out there that Lizzie was in the 19th century.
Sure. This is her response to all of that. She pops out from behind the wall that she's hiding behind and she says, "Hi, I was just thinking about what grade I'd give myself. I realized it would be an A plus, but I've heard we grade on a curve here, so I'm probably what? More like a B for the coasts or B minus? If you have a minute to figure it out, be sure to let me know."
Ah, iconic. Because like, I love that she made it clear that she overheard that, and she embarrasses the shit out of him.
Mhm.
It's great shit, but then, like, the thing that doesn't quite translate for me is that he's so rude, and then he's, like, sort of, like, intensely polite thereafter,
Mhm.
and it's not just, like, proposal get in, like,
Mhm.
and then onward, it's, like, before proposal get in, he's super polite.
Yeah, it's all very strange, and another thing about their relationship that I feel like is exaggerated here is the level of Caroline Bingley that's involved.
I kinda love it, though.
No, it makes a lot of sense for this story.
Yes.
Like, he doesn't have the family ties of, like, Catherine de Bourgh trying to separate Lizzie, from him. Lizzie just thinks that he's dating Caroline the whole time.
Absolutely. And I think like this is a good moment to transition into talking about Caroline
Mhm.
because I mean, honestly, Lizzie and Darcy are probably the closest to the book
Yeah.
of all the characters.
Mhm. Except for the hate sex, but,
Except for the hate sex, but come on, they would have been doing that in the
they were
19th
hate sexing
century.
with their eyes.
They were sparring with like sexual tension, so it's the same. But the Caroline Bingley in this is incredible. And like deeply villainous.
Yes.
So Caroline in this is a manager in Hollywood, and she's specifically her brother Chip's manager.
And, like, only one other person.
Yeah, which I mean, they're family money.
Right.
And so she doesn't need clients. And Caroline herself clearly wants the attention because if we're going right to the end, it's clear from like the story that she's trying to get with Darcy, but as a backup plan, trying to be a star on this TV show Eligible, aka The Bachelor.
Which she succeeds.
Yeah, and the disdain that this woman has for everybody in the story is so palpable, and one of my favorite moments of the entire story is that there's a barbecue going on, and he's like and Darcy's like, "Oh, you can hang out with Caroline," and Lizzie has to turn to him and be like, "You know, Caroline and I just absolutely cannot stand each other," and he was like, "What?"
Yeah.
And it's, like, so organically true to the
Men.
men just generally not knowing that like sometimes like women just despise each other, but these 2, I am shocked. This man is a doctor,
He's an
and they're
idiot.
they're literally sitting there like snarling at each other the entire book.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's so good.
No notes on this Caroline Bigley. I would say that is also kind of Catherine DeVerg.
Oh, yeah, she is because at the end, she goes up to Liz and is like, "You can't have Darcy. It's basically understood that we're gonna end up together." And Liz is like, "I can't have him? Do you mean you're not together?"
Wait, we should touch on this because Georgie texts Lizzie
Yes.
and it's like, I feel really bad for getting drunk and telling you that I didn't like Caroline after what happened with my brother and Caroline.
But well, it's not really how she phrases it. She says, "I'm sure you've heard from my brother about him and Caroline, and now I feel really awkward about our conversation. I should have bitten my tongue." And the whole time, Liz thinks she feels awkward about their conversation because their conversation was when she said that Darcy likes her and does she like Darcy back. But what she's really saying she should have bitten her tongue about is saying that she hated Caroline.
Exactly. And Lizzie just assumes that Caroline and Darcy are together, which I've been there.
Yeah.
When you get a really like a text that really like freaks you out and you just decide not to respond.
Yeah.
But then this is a great moment because the other thing that happens is that Lizzie in the book thinks there's no hope for her and Darcy until Catherine de Bourgh has to travel all the way to Longbourn to try and prevent the match. And she's like, "Oh, if you traveled all this way, maybe there's hope."
Yeah.
And this is the same thing where Caroline's like, "Hey, back off, he's mine, and we're meant to be together, and you're getting in the way." And Lizzie's like, "Oh, I thought you guys were already together, so I guess I'm wrong."
Yeah. I will say in the book, Darcy is the one who comes to her and says, "When my aunt told me that you
Yes.
said that maybe like you didn't say yes or no to getting together with me, that taught me to hope." In this, we give the agency to Liz, and Liz is like, "Caroline telling me that I was getting in the way taught me to hope," and then she gets to propose to him. I will say it was a little weird that they jumped straight to marriage, but
Listen, they if you think about it, they were hooking up for like 3 months,
that's
right?
true. Sure.
And that's enough time to get married
Sometimes. My dad
sometimes.
proposed to my mom after that amount of time.
Yeah, and they had a really, really happy, loving marriage.
Yeah.
So, it makes sense, but it's quite a quick relation.
Yes. So speaking of Catherine de Bourgh, in this, she's a, feminist icon who doesn't have much bearing on the plot other than Liz just really needs to interview her.
She is essentially Gloria Steinem,
Mhm.
as far as this goes, like a glamorous, gorgeous, like aging feminist.
Kind, a queen.
Kind of the most fun I've had, like, seeing a take on Catherine de Bourgh, because Catherine de Bourgh is in almost every adaptation, and she's usually a nightmare,
Yeah.
and in this, you wait for the other shoe to drop, you wait for the other shoe, and it doesn't, and
Yeah.
I kinda loved it.
She just inspires Lizzie.
She's just a step forward in Lizzie's career. She
Yeah.
gives Lizzie a reason to leave Cincinnati,
Mhm.
which ultimately leads to Lizzie going to visit Charlotte, who we'll get to, has moved in with Willie, aka Mr.
Yep.
Collins. And I enjoyed seeing a nice Catherine de Bourgh.
Yeah.
She's supposed to be brilliant and witty and fun. And I think they used Catherine de Bourgh to flesh out the non romance aspects of the story a little
Yeah.
bit. And I liked that because Pride and Prejudice is class commentary, straight romance, but it was nice to see some of Lizzie's career fleshed out as well. And that is something that, like, again, is very like 2010s to have like very career focused girl boss stuff going on, but not
Yeah.
necessarily in a bad way here. Here, it's like Lizzie is like a very passionate journalist and essentially, like I said, interviewing Gloria Steinem and just like really excited about the opportunity.
Yeah, and I mean, then the last question she asks her is about love and is about her
Oh,
relationship, and Kathy DeBerg gives this really beautiful answer about why she ended up with her husband, which was that with all the men before, she felt like she was having to perform the perfect couple act, and with him, they were never performing, she could just be herself, and that's why she ended up with him, and I think that in a way that does make Liz think about who she can be herself with.
and that's really beautiful
Yeah.
because it turns out that's Darcy for her.
Yeah.
And I loved that line. I thought it was really beautifully rendered as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really good moment.
Yeah.
Love Kathy.
Yeah. Should we talk about Charlotte and Willie?
Before we do, I didn't say it once because it didn't seem to warrant it. Catherine de
Oh, sure,
Bourgh.
of course.
But like barely though, because
She's
she's not that. Here
she's
it's
just a little old lady who's very sweet and gives Liz a hug and says, "Be well."
yes, exactly.
Yes.
All right. So we touched on Charlotte and Collins here. The Collins plot line,
He's her cousin.
I mean, I like screeched and put my book down.
Mhm.
So listeners, in this version, perfect rendition of Mr. Collins in terms of like what he represents in the story.
Totally. He's a tech bro who just won't shut up about his fucking tech stuff.
It felt really authentic to have a guy who was quite successful in the tech world with nary a social skill in sight.
Mhm.
Who is not like a bad person, but clearly has not developed past 13 on treatment of women.
Mhm.
That feels extremely real.
Yeah,
And Lizzie kind of enjoys his company, but like in a cousinly way.
because he's her cousin.
Exactly. He's deeply her cousin.
He's her step cousin. But that
I
didn't work in Clueless, and it doesn't work now.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Even in Clueless, like they're not like technically like still siblings. Like their parents like were married for like a second and then divorced.
Mhm.
But that being said, it's like not the fucking point here. Like I hate the use of step anything because it's just like you're still related.
So he basically forces himself on Lizzie, and she's like, "Get off of me. I'm not making out with you. You're my cousin." And he's like, "I'm your step cousin."
And like everyone's like, but he's your step
She's like,
cousin.
"He's my first cousin."
And Mrs. Bennett wants her to date him because we'll get to this. The Bennetts are broke
Really broke.
and he's super rich and he can save them. But like also like it's just crazy. Like this bordered on unrealistic to me.
Well, yeah, because he's her cousin.
Yeah, and like it just like it's not even like listen, it feels possible that a really uncomfortable cousin would mistake friendliness for wanting to you to make a move. That being said, what didn't ring true to me at all was like all the parents being like, "Yes, on
Yeah.
board. We want this."
Yeah.
Cuz like that does no one wants their children. Like no siblings want their children to date.
No, it's weird.
Very weird.
Yeah, and, also because Cousin Willie was so annoying, it didn't really make sense that he and Charlotte fell in love to me because Charlotte's so cool.
Charlotte is awesome in this. Strikes me as super cool, and there was something very organic to her and Lizzie's friendship. Like
Yeah.
the plot is essentially Charlotte's a very successful marketing exec in Cincinnati at Procter and Gamble, and Lizzie is coming back from New York and hasn't talked to her much since high school, but they pick up where they left off and find that they are clearly like still meant to be besties,
Mhm.
and that feels really real.
Yeah.
That felt very, like, lived in. I feel like it would be possible. So, like, I think what worked for me about the Charlotte Collins plotline, which didn't across the board work for me, but it feels possible that, like, you see your annoying, awkward cousin, and someone else sees someone really smart and maybe a little uncomfortable, but very sweet. Like, it feels possible that that was seen, and, like,
Mhm.
I think the fact that Charlotte wanted to have kids is really what separated her from Lizzie.
Yeah.
Because when you want to have kids and you're in your late 30s, like I've seen a lot of women like kind of like take a chance on a guy.
Yeah.
And not in a bad way, but like Lizzie had the freedom to be like, I am looking for a man and I'm not on a clock.
Yeah.
But, like, I think that the difference between how they felt, like, in the book, both and we'll get to Jane in a second, but both Jane and Charlotte want children, and it is an unfortunate biological reality for a lot of women that once you hit a certain age, you are on a clock to find someone to have children with, and women deal with this in a lot of different ways. As we learned through the story, Jane took matters into her own hands. Charlotte didn't, and she ended up wanting to find a man to be with for that. So it feels like to me like taking a chance on a guy who would adore you, who is smart, and clearly we are led to believe that even Lizzie enjoys his company generally.
Yeah, he's not a bad person, he's just annoying.
He's he's not a bad person. I actually even, like, thought it was interesting in this that Lizzie actually kind of liked hanging out with him
Before he tried to make out with
before
her.
he tried to make out with her.
Yeah.
So, like, I kind of bought it. The part that, like, did not translate for me was, like, the making out with the cousin thing. Like, the rest of it, like, if he hadn't made I didn't think he needed to make the move on Lizzie to make it work for me.
Mhm.
I think he could have had some other falling out with Lizzie. He could have said something that pissed her off,
Yeah.
and Charlotte could have still gone for him.
'Cause he said a couple of things that pissed her off prior to making out with her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, he was, like, asking her really weird questions,
About yeah, and, like,
and
kind of sexist.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, like, he clearly, like, has not updated his, like, discussions with women since he was 13 years old,
Yeah.
and he had a whole awkward thing where he explained that he'd had sex with a prostitute,
Mhm.
which, like, you know, go off,
Fine.
king.
Yeah.
Like,
But
whatever.
why are you telling your cousin?
Exactly. So, like, I feel like, the kiss being in there and the mom wanting them to get married thing, I felt like that didn't need to be there. I
Yeah.
felt like it was a little too on the nose for what happens in Pride and Prejudice. I thought you probably could have had him be, like, annoying Lizzie and her mom, like, aggressively pushing her to try to, like, get him to set her up with somebody or something that, like, pissed her off.
Mhm.
But the kiss, which it took it a little too far for me.
Yeah. Which
'Cause
is, you know, a very valid reaction.
sometimes I just don't wanna watch cousins kiss.
Sometimes the cousins don't need to marry.
The cousins do not need to marry. We are technically still in Jane Austen, but we're in 2013 and in Cincinnati, and surely the cousins do not usually kiss.
Yeah.
Um,
Speaking of women having babies, should we talk about Jane/Bingley?
yes. So I'll give a quick rendition of this plotline because I actually thought these characters were both changed quite a bit.
Mhm.
And I have a lot of interesting and, like, sort of interweaving thoughts with it.
Sure.
So Bingley features heavily in this story and as, like, a bookend because he is essentially the bachelor. He goes on a reality television show to find love and is famous for breaking down crying and not wanting to be with any of the women in the end. He sees Jane and falls deeply in love with her. And unbeknownst to either of them at the time, Jane, who has been getting artificially inseminated to try to, like, have a baby on her own at age 40.
Yeah, she's
Um,
39 at the start. She
yeah,
turns 40.
she gets pregnant essentially, but she finds out after she's already very, very quickly fallen in love with Chip Bingley.
Chip.
Yeah. And then Charles Chip ends up quitting his job at the ER where he's a doctor and going back to Hollywood to film The Eligible Reunion, aka Bachelor in Paradise,
Mhm.
and kind of blows off Jane in a shitty way. They come back to each other because he can't stop thinking about her. And at the time, I will talk about this at length. Jane is pregnant and having her baby up by on her own and living with her best lesbian friend and being her yoga instructor in the Hudson Valley with
Sounds like an ideal life.
I could not believe that Jane left these beautiful lesbians in the Hudson Valley to be with a man.
I
I
know.
could not believe it because that sounded amazing.
Literally, she had it made, and they were just paying for her life. Like, mooch off your friends for a little bit while you're pregnant. Let
No,
it happen.
literally. So Jane's best friend from Barnard is, like, a very successful executive in New York City and has a Hudson Valley home with her wife, who is a preschool teacher or, like, an elementary school teacher or something. And I believe they have a child together
Mhm.
and, like, a bunch of pets and, like, this beautiful big mansion. And what they want more than anything is a personal yoga instructor. Our girly Jane in this story is a yoga instructor and keeping it tight at like the ripe age of 39, and she is pregnant and living as her best friend's personal yoga instructor in a mansion in Hudson Valley. And
Rent free.
I like Chip Bingley must be astonishingly good in bed
Yeah.
because, like, you would have to pay me so much money to leave that gig behind.
Also, yes, and also, like, in this version of the story, Darcy's not the reason that Chip left. Like, Darcy might have implied that Jane wasn't as into him as he was into
Mhm.
her, but Chip leaves because he's freaked out about the baby. Partially because he's freaked out about the baby, and partially because he's afraid of being a doctor, and he doesn't wanna be a doctor, and so he's like, I'm actually
Yeah.
he follows his heart a
Yeah.
little bit to Hollywood. So, like, he has a little bit more agency, and he has to take a little bit more responsibility in
Yep.
that apology that we don't get to see.
Which is okay. It's all from Lizzie's perspective, so
Sure. Yeah, which holds true to the book as well, the book being Pride and Prejudice, but, like, he really had better apologized good for
oh, yeah.
leaving her like he did. At the same time, Jane has a little bit more agency in this as well because she comes to her own conclusion that Darcy must have been the reason that Chip left.
Mhm.
Nobody, like, tells her that, and it's not even the whole truth, but she at some point is like, "Yeah, Darcy must have told Chip."
Yeah, and I also wanna mention, like, at the end of the story, like, one of, like, the colliding events for everybody is that Jane and Bingley agree to get married on reality
Which
TV.
doesn't make a ton of sense.
Hear me out.
Okay.
I kind of enjoyed it.
I mean,
Well,
it's free.
yeah, for me, like, what I thought Curtis Sittenfeld was doing with the Eligible, like, TV show was bringing us the charade of love that is very prevalent in the Jane Austen world, this, like, transactional etiquette that went back and forth over the economics of dating in Jane Austen, grand the sound effect, and this performance of courtship.
Mhm.
And instead of giving us that throughout the book, it reminds us that we're still doing that with the reality TV show.
Interesting.
So I thought that, like, what we were doing with the TV series was essentially putting together the same level of performance
Mhm.
that is part of the Jane Austen world. I thought that was the comment that, like, was kind of coming through for me.
That is absolutely correct. What didn't make sense to me was not that it happened, but more that the characters that she built in primarily in Jane would agree to that.
I bought Jane agreeing to it. What I thought was the flaw in it was that it honestly, like, this Bingley might have been, like, my least favorite rendition of Bingley.
Mm.
Not, like, in terms of he's being poorly written, I think he's actually quite well written, and I actually think she captures the flaws in Charles Bingley better than most renditions of him as a character. But just the, like, him being on reality TV and, like, more than once and, like, being kind of, like, feckless about being a doctor
Mhm.
and being wishy-washy with Jane and breaking up with her over text, and then, like, coming back to her and being like, "Well, I'm kind of bound to this show, but, like, do you wanna get married on TV so that we don't have to wait to get married?" It just struck he was so much more performative.
Well,
Um
he needs 12 opinions,
Exactly,
and those
and
are all producers' opinions.
exactly. So it didn't translate as the wrong rendition of him. It just, like, for the first time, honestly, like, since I've read Pride and Prejudice and I've always, like, kind of adored Bingley even with his faults, I was like, "Oh, this guy is, like, not amazing." Like,
He's not perfect.
he's not a great dude.
Yeah.
And it just, like, really, like, struck me, like, how much he was letting his own life happen to him in, like, really extreme ways. And
Yeah.
doing so in kind of like a cowardly, wishy-washy way. Didn't hate him, but, like, you know, it was interesting to read a Bingley I didn't love.
Yeah. Yeah, you're putting your finger on a lot of things that I was kind of feeling but didn't have words for, and I like that, and I think that Darcy in this, like, because Bingley was so wishy-washy and was like that, Darcy was kind of that steady hand and, like, that friend that he could lean on in a way that felt very genuine, like, he set up the dinner with Lizzie and Jane,
Mhm,
and if he hadn't done that, Bingley would have been too much of a pussy to ask her back out
mhm.
or ask her to marry him, which is what he
Yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah. And just so, like, yeah, no, I mean, it was just really interesting because, like, it also, again, made Darcy more dreamy by comparison.
Mhm.
Because, like, I thought this Darcy was quite a bit softer,
Mhm.
despite his extremely rude outbursts, both when he first meets Lizzie and at Proposal Geddon. Every other aspect of the story, he is, like, very sweet,
Yeah.
very sturdy, very strong, a
Mhm.
little sassy, but only a little bit,
Yeah.
mostly kind of charming. And so
Yeah.
this Darcy was, like, really quite dreamy, and usually I feel like Darcy and Bingley are a little bit more even-handed in the dreaminess because Darcy's usually less dreamy and Bingley's usually more dreamy.
Mhm.
But I didn't hate it. I thought it was cool for the story, and I also really loved this Jane
Mhm.
because I loved that she'd taken her own journey into her own hands by, like, being like, "I want children, I will find a way to have children," and when that coincided oddly with her finding love, it kind of worked out well, and she managed to say, "No, but, like, this is still something I want. I will be raising this child,"
Mhm.
and she brings him along in that journey rather than, like, choosing one or the
Yeah,
other.
well, at first she was considering choosing him,
Yeah.
and then she chooses the baby, but in the end, when it works out, she's willing to have both, but, like, she's gonna it showed that she was really strong in her convictions with what she did
Yep.
want.
Again, though, you have a gig as a private yoga instructor in a mansion with your best friend in the Hudson Valley. You would have to pay me so much money to leave that situation.
I do wish that they didn't, in the end, tell the American public that the baby was Chip's.
Yeah, I figured that might happen. Again, it goes to, like, clearly Curtis Sittenfeld has ideas about the performance of, courtship on reality TV,
Yeah, it's interesting.
and I thought that made for a more biting satire
Yeah,
at in the end,
yeah,
but I think that, like, it is interesting that, like, Jane is kind of gonna be living a lie. Jane's story is, like, 80% happy in the end,
mhm.
but not all the way happy because of this, like, weirdness of her becoming kind of famous
The
and because
NDAs and
yeah, and because, like, this baby is gonna be, like, part of it. One thing I did love is that we meet Mrs. Hurst,
yeah,
and she's the fucking
she's
best.
awesome, and Liz is just like, "I didn't know you had another sister."
Yeah, the Bingleys don't suck across the board in this, it's just Caroline who sucks,
Yeah,
and you meet his, Charles's other older sister, and Liz is like, "Oh, she's awesome."
yeah.
Like
She has, like, 2 kids and a husband, and then she gets too drunk and throws up in a corner, and she's like, "Yes, let's rage."
yeah, I mean, she sounded like a good time, so kind of being Mr. and Mrs. Hurst at
Yeah.
the same time.
Yeah, I pictured her as, like, a mom who hasn't let loose in a really long time and so is a lightweight, but
I pictured that, like, generally the Bingleys are kinda chill and Caroline's just got too much main character energy and
yes.
bratty behavior.
Yeah.
I love. But anyway, I liked this rendition of Jane. I did find it interesting, and we'll talk about this when we get to the other Bennets, that Jane was not a perfect person in this.
No.
Usually Jane is just, like, perfect
No,
and
she lets Lizzie do a lot of the dirty work.
she does, and Lizzie is so burdened by her family in this book, and you hear from the very beginning, Lizzie is the only self-sufficient Bennet. They all rely on Mr. and Mrs. Bennet's income, except Lizzie, who makes her own money as a journalist. Jane is a yoga instructor living in New York, but her parents pay her rent, which is, I mean, listen, New York's expensive, but,
Yeah.
like, it groups her with the other Bennets in a way that is not usually the case. Usually the story is like Lizzie and Jane against the Bennets.
Yeah.
And that is still how this story plays out. But Jane is amongst sort of the burdens in some ways,
Yeah.
which is not usually the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So should we talk about the other Bennets then?
Oh yes, we sure should. So we have Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, who Mr. Bennet is a guy who comes from family money and did nothing but, like, invest his family's money poorly and spend it all.
Yeah.
And he and Mrs. Bennet don't do much other than go to, like, the Cincinnati Country Club, and Mrs. Bennet is, like, planning a big old luncheon.
Yeah, which is kind of anticlimactic in the end.
Honestly, though, that kind of works for me.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. She reminded me a lot of Emily Gilmore, but, like, less competent.
She is a bit Emily Gilmore, except, like, tacky.
Yeah, she's
Like
an off-brand Emily Gilmore.
yeah, exactly, like, when you what you ordered when it arrives, Emily Gilmore.
Yeah.
Um, and then obviously, just, like, so we can summarize, we've talked about Jane and Lizzie. Mary the rendition of Mary in this,
Ace Mary
Ace Mary,
at long last.
canon
Yeah.
canon Ace Mary, who is getting seemingly endless number of master's degrees,
Yep.
um,
And has bowling league on Tuesdays, but refuses to tell her family where she goes.
and is just simply an asshole.
Yeah, she really is mean.
So mean, and they talk the another, like, weird thing in the book is, like, it's like, "And Mary was the ugly one, and she was also mean."
She's ugly, she's mean. Everyone keeps saying that she's gay, and she's like, "I'm not gay, I'm not gay." And finally, in the last page of the book, she's like, "I'm not interested in anyone like that. I just want a bowl."
I loved it because here's the thing, so at first I was kind of like, the Mary is so one note. That last page of the book completely turned it around for me
Yeah, I gave her a soul.
because you see, like, oh, she's not mean, she's got this whole inner life that she's, like, kind of afraid to share with her sisters.
Because they wouldn't understand.
Yeah, and then, like, she's like, yeah, and Lydia keeps calling her gay, and that's kind of like a big plot in the story is that Lydia keeps making fun of Mary for being gay, and it's Lydia who ends up in a queer relationship at the end.
Right, and then,
Um,
like and Lydia is very much not gay, but Mary refuses to understand that as well and
yeah,
decides to be a transphobe, so
exactly.
they're all really flawed, except Kitty,
Kitty was flawed too, she was super lazy.
she was really lazy, but she was, like, the most chill out of all the sisters and actually, like, took Liz's advice and was like, "I'm gonna go to,
Yeah.
like, school, become a manicurist."
Well, if you notice, Mary also took Liz's advice and ended up at Procter& and
Oh,
Gamble
yeah, she did,
with
didn't she?
her degree, and my favorite thing about Mary's is, like, yeah, in college, she tried it with 2 boys and 1 girl, none of it worked, so she
Yeah.
gave up on it, and I was like, "Queen."
Yeah, honestly, I love that for her. And I think what's fun about the renditions of all of these sisters is that, like, we can appreciate that they're all deeply flawed
Yep.
and also find them to be a little bit of icons.
Yeah.
Except I will say, like I said earlier, this Mr. Bennet made me understand why people hate Mr. Bennet so much because he even with Lizzie, like, she remained the only voice of reason. In Jane Austen, I always kind of thought of Mr. Bennet and Lizzie as in cahoots.
They certainly are, and Mr. Bennet clearly favors Lizzie over her sisters.
But in this, like, Lizzie is constantly trying to keep him on track, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, yeah, well, we're deep in debt."
So, yeah, the plot here is essentially that, Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Bennet do not have health insurance, and because we live in the United States, when Mr. Bennet needs a triple bypass, he just is out of pocket $300,000,
Mhm. And
and
he's just not paying it.
they're just, like, in debt, and they have 2 mortgages on the house, so clearly, like, they've been in debt for a while, which, again, goes to, like, when Lizzie wants to sell the house, this is a minor thing, and, well, it doesn't really have a lot of bearing on the plot. Lizzie wants to sell the house to solve all their financial problems, but if they've already taken out 2 mortgages on the house, I'm not quite sure how selling it's gonna fix that. Because usually when you have a mortgage, you use the proceeds of by selling the house to pay it off.
Right.
Like, if I buy a house for $100 with a mortgage of, like, $80, um, and I've paid off, like, $10 worth of that mortgage, and there's 70 outstanding. When I sell the house for $110, 70 of that's going straight to the bank, and then I just get $40.
Question,
Yeah.
if the f hasn't the house been in their family for years?
Yes.
So how did
So,
they why did they need to take out mortgages on it? Don't they already own it?
good question. You can take out a mortgage after you already own a home. A mortgage is just debt you take on with the house as collateral. Usually, people mortgage a house when they buy it so that when they take on, like, they need the money to buy the house.
Right.
So
It's a
you
loan,
so it's a
right?
loan to purchase the house, and the collateral on the loan is the house. So if
Mhm,
you stop paying your mortgage, the bank will collect the house and
mhm,
sell it to somebody else and collect the proceeds to pay off the loan.
mhm.
So that's foreclosure. Um, but if you just want, so if you have a house worth 200 bucks, for example, and obviously these are small numbers,
Yes, yes.
but $200, you find yourself in need of cash. You don't want to, like, liquidate your assets. You don't want to sell your house. What you can do is get a loan of $100 or like 200, even like $300 sometimes, and put your house up as collateral for the loan. So if you don't pay back the loan, the house is at risk. You
Mhm.
didn't use it to pay for the house, you're using it to just live your life. and so you just have a cash flow of 300,000, like $300, you know? So, like, you just have access to that money, but, like, what you're actually doing when you buy a house is you're taking in debt, and your debt's going directly to pay for the house.
I see.
So you can just take out a mortgage and take the money
Right.
if you want.
I
So
see.
2 mortgages on a house means you've taken out 2 loans
And so
on the
they're gonna
house.
need to when they sell the house for 900 and whatever $1,000.
They have a loan to pay off on they have 2 loans to pay off
Mhm.
before anything else happens.
So hopefully they had enough to pay for the apartment that they
Yeah,
ended up buying,
it's
but
not specified how much
renting.
they paid for the apartment, and it's not specified how much their loans are. What we learn is that they sell it for, like, over a little over $900,000,
Mhm.
and then they have enough to purchase a smaller apartment, pay off their 2 loans, and maintain their country club membership for a little while longer.
Mhm. This whole storyline, whether or not it makes sense
Yeah.
financially or logistically, it's odd to me that they're all just like, "Okay, Lizzie, we'll do what Lizzie says." Like, she's a grown adult and she's smart and, like, I would listen to her, but her mom just acts like
We need to talk about this Mrs. Bennett.
yeah, let's talk about this Mrs. Bennett before we get into that.
There is a lot to say about this Mrs. Bennett. She is such an asshole
Yeah,
of a
she
Mrs.
really,
Bennett.
really sucks.
Oh my god. It's, like, extraordinarily grating.
She's racist. She's
Anti-Semitic,
anti-Semitic,
fatphobic,
fatphobic,
homophobic.
transphobic, homophobic. What are we missing?
She's got a
Xenophobic.
she has a massive shopping addiction.
Mhm,
Um,
and classist.
she's super classist. She's cruel to Lizzie, like, across the board.
Yeah.
About the fact that Lizzie hasn't had children, and Jane too,
Mhm,
and about like men not being with Lizzie. And she's constantly makes comments about how her daughters are unmarried, and it's all she talks about,
mhm,
which is brutal.
mhm.
Um, and so yeah, this Mrs. Bennett is like one of the least flattering portrayals I have ever read
Yeah,
or
she doesn't
seen.
have a single moment of where we feel sympathy for her.
I would disagree with that. There were
When did you feel sympathy for her?
when Lizzie was forcing her to see all those apartments on end, and she was crying, and Lizzie was telling her to toughen up and just keep going. I felt bad for her because, like, Lizzie was being super insensitive.
That's true.
Um, that being said, I she did not gain my sympathies for most of the story because she had no reason to be pissed off at her daughters for not being married. It's not like in Jane Austen where if they didn't get married, they would all starve.
Right.
They could do what they want.
She should want them to get married just to get them out of the house. Like, 3 of them still live at home, and yet she's fine with
Yep.
them living at home.
Also, deep shopping addiction
Mhm.
for random things, and that felt very organic.
Yeah, and the fact that Lizzie was going through and getting rid of stuff. First of all, I was so mad at Liz for going through and getting rid of stuff without telling anyone. If I was her mom, I would have been so mad. But in any event, her mom like ordered something in 1993 and then was like, "Have you seen my pineapple throw pillow?" And Liz was like,
See, I had sympathy for Liz on this because, like, it sounded like her mother would just, like, never give him up.
But I can't get behind Liz coming home and deciding, without telling her family, that they need to move. She doesn't even live there.
Well, she does tell her dad.
She tells her dad after she's already been seeing a realtor.
No, she tells her dad before she's seeing a realtor. She just doesn't tell her mom or her sisters before, which is still unhinged behavior.
Oh, yeah, I guess she does. She says, "Wait, you have to move." And he's like, "Okay."
Yeah, no, but he's like, he knows she's right. I understood what this plot was doing. Liz was so burdened by her family because they were so financially irresponsible.
Mhm.
She drains her whole savings trying to save them. She
Yeah.
guarantees Mary and Kitty's apartment. And she tries to ensure that like everyone's like taken care of. She deals with their spider infestation in their home, which horrifying shit.
Yeah.
Um, but I also, like, agree with you that it's so infantilizing to the rest of the family, and, like, I think that the author is being a little infantilizing rather than Liz,
Yeah.
but also at the same time, like, it does kind of track a little bit with how the family is in the original book.
Yeah, I mean, she had to do what she had to do. Is it realistic, first of all, to find a new apartment for 2 of your sisters that they can move into the next day, like, the day before your house is gonna get fumigated, like, when they're not even going out looking for apartments? Is
No,
it
no, it's not realistic.
is it realistic that you're gonna get your giant Tudor mansion in shape to be seen by prospective buyers in 3 days?
Yes, but for $300,000 less than it would have been if they had gotten it in better condition.
Yeah.
Like, that did track to me as kind of real.
Mhm.
Um,
I guess that's fair. I think it's tough. It's one of those moments where, like, Liz did do what she thought was best for her family, and also I completely understood why everyone in her family was so upset with her.
oh, yeah, no, it is crazy behavior to secretly try to sell a house.
Yeah.
But I also, I felt the panic for Liz when she realized, like, her family's financial troubles.
Yes, absolutely, and that was the only solution
Yeah.
because you're not gonna be able to teach them how to budget when they've been living like this for the decades.
Yeah, exactly. It was crazy for her to tell the real estate agent that's why they needed to sell, though.
Yeah. She told everyone.
It was crazy.
She was just, like, running with Darcy, who she hates, and she's like, "Guess what? My family's in extreme debt."
Yeah, I absolutely totally loved this because she told Darcy everything, and she was like, "Wow, it's nice to talk about it," but she also told everybody else everything.
Yeah, but then there was one moment where she brought it up to Jasper, and he was like, "Wait, what?" And she was like, "Oh, I had that conversation with Darcy," and that was very effective to me.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, we've talked about all of the major players in this book. We've touched on some of the themes, but let's really quickly just go through some of the major themes of the book.
Yeah, so the themes we listed were gender roles, Regency era versus 2016, 2013. Which, I mean, like, very, very briefly, like we said, aging up the Bennett sisters
Mhm.
helps pull that pressure out more fully,
Mhm.
and also the pressure to have children is,
Mhm.
like, very rampant in this book.
Yes.
Performance and love. I talked about this with respect to Eligible,
Eligible, yeah.
the television show. I thought that was a really fun way to bring in that element of, like, absurdity with respect to courtship.
Mhm.
And American Class, which we also kind of talked about, Cincinnati high society versus what the real true up 0.01% of America is like.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about Pemberley, but did not sound as charming as Pemberley does in the book, but did sound as Lux.
I wanted to be there.
I mean, yeah, the pool sounded great. Pemberley's like this massive Bay Area state, which is fun, but also so much.
That brings us to the end of our conversation about this book. I did have a funniest quote that I wanted to
Oh, please
share.
do. Please do. Funniest quote?
This is after the truth is revealed that Ham is trans. Surely, if Liz had learned that anybody in her social circle in New York had eloped with someone transgender, she'd have greeted the news with support. She might even have felt that self congratulatory pride that heterosexual white people are known to experience due to proximate diversity. I just thought that was so funny.
Yeah, that's the thing. When it comes to Curtis Sittenfeld, you can tell in a lot of moments she's really trying to, like, skewer this, like, Midwestern white family for its kind of, like, perspectives on the world, including Liz herself. Done successfully sometimes, less successfully others, but I thought in that particular moment was probably, like, the slam dunk of the book.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a really, really funny book, and overall, I had an excellent
Yeah.
time.
Questions about Austen adaptations in this one in particular?
Um, gosh, I mean, I was left with questions about.
I have some questions about whether or not people agree with us on whether or not it's funny, and
Mhm,
also whether or not people agree with our takes on sort of like our criticisms of
mhm.
the way that identity is used in this book.
Yeah, because that was
Um,
a big one, and I'm curious how seriously people took it.
yes, and also again, like, these are our opinions based on, like, our, like, gut reactions to this book. We are also open to listening to anything people from these communities have to say on the matter.
Absolutely.
Because we are just, two self-congratulatory white girls sitting in Brooklyn.
Absolutely.
Um, who wins this book?
Gosh, I mean,
I'm gonna say Lydia
okay.
because she got by far the happiest ending I've ever seen Lydia get.
She did get an excellent ending, and she definitely comes out on top in terms of who's happy, who
Yeah.
gets what they want.
Who's left in a better circumstance in this book compared to Pride and Prejudice.
Sure, she
Also,
definitely wins.
Catherine de Bourgh as well.
Oh, Catherine de Bourgh, definitely, and I think that Darcy gets everything that he wants as well, and he is portrayed in a flattering light overall, whereas Lydia is portrayed in a less flattering light just as a person.
Yep.
Um, but I'll be honest, I didn't there was nobody I'm gonna give it to Ham. Ham
Ham,
wins.
you know what? Actually, because Ham is our first openly trans character in any of our Jane Austen adaptations. Is
Yeah.
that right?
I there might have been some side characters in some other modern adaptations that I may not be remembering right now, but I think that this is the first main character that we've gotten, and I was gonna say I didn't root for anyone in this book because they were all so deeply flawed, but I really did root for Ham.
Hella rooted for Ham. Go Ham.
Yeah,
And you know what? He ends up in a pretty good spot at
he
the end of the
does.
book.
He's got
So,
a hot girlfriend who's just a little bit dumb. A hot wife.
hot dumb wife, and opening up a second CrossFit gym.
Yeah, super
And
successful.
yeah, just like killing it. So go Ham.
Yeah.
Go Ham.
Go Ham.
Listeners, that concludes our coverage of the story Eligible by Curtis Sittenfeld. For next time, we maybe or maybe not returning to certain adaptations of Persuasion that could be a movie.
Yeah, guys, don't hate
Um,
us.
Sorry, I know we already gave you a lot of Persuasion 2022 content, but I think we have something really fun coming down the pipeline in defense of the movie. So please look out for that and don't hate us for continuing with this movie, guys. It's fun. There's octopi. It's great.
There's octopi. Uh,
So until next time, stay proper.
and be sure to throw out all your food before you fumigate for spiders.
Yes.
Pod and Prejudice is edited by Molly Burdick and audio produced by Graham Cook. Our show art is designed by Torrance Brown. Our show is transcribed by SpeechDocs Podcast Transcription. For transcripts and to learn more about our team, check out our website at podandprejudice.com. To keep up with the show, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Pod and Prejudice. If you love what you hear, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/podandprejudice to see how you can support us, or just drop us a rating and a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.